Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Keep It Science. We are back and with a bit of a twist. This time we are shining a light on rare diseases, from insights from biotech leaders and specialist clinicians to personal stories from the people impacted the most. Now, we say rare, but over 300 million people live with rare diseases. That's roughly about 1 in 20 people face years of diagnostic journeys with limited treatment options and struggle with diseases for the rest of their lives due to a lack of a cure.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Kugler, and for me this season is incredibly personal. I have myself a rare autoimmune disease, which includes scleroderma, dermatomyositis, and secondary Raynaud's, which is called an overlap disease. And so as a scientist and rare disease patient, I hope to contribute insights from both of these worlds in this season.
And I'm Dr. Nick Gorn, and together with Elizabeth and a variety of guests, we'll explore everything in rare diseases, the science, the stories, the struggles, and most importantly, these exciting breakthroughs that we're seeing every single day.
Hello and welcome. Today, we are going to look at the big picture of the research landscape in rare disease, both here in the UK and abroad. And so we will be talking about how rare disease is studied, what challenges come with clinical trials, especially in rare disease, and why we need more investment, more collaboration, and more visibility. And so to talk about this really exciting topics, we have joining us from across the pond, Dr. Gregory Gordon from the Scleroderma Research Foundation, or short SRF. And SRF is a US-based organization that drives forward research and advocacy to find better treatments and ultimately a cure for scleroderma. And so Gregory has joined SRF as Chief Medical Officer in 2024, and he leads the CONQUEST platform study, and he supports the study and the community with outreach and patient engagement. He is a physician and attorney with over 15 years in biotech, and he has helped many companies and platforms to really bring to market. And he was also the Vice President of Clinical Development at PTC Therapeutics. So welcome, Greg. It's absolutely amazing to have you here today with us.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
It's amazing to talk to you. And it's also lovely to have you on this episode. And so we have lots to discuss. So let's dive straight in. So first, we want to talk about the rare disease research landscape in general, because obviously there is globally various differences that we want to talk about. And so what we really kind of want to first understand is, so why rare disease studies are so challenging. So firstly, we know there are fewer patients, and obviously there are a lot of different diseases that sometimes can't be clustered to be studied in one kind of study. So we need to have different fractional studies that cover them. But also there is obviously another problem, which is that there's much less awareness. And so unlike, for example, in cancer, diseases are often way less known and have less attention, less funding, and less researchers really working on them. So Greg, could you maybe give us an overview about the research landscape of rare disease in the US and what your main challenges are?
Sure, absolutely. So, I think the issues with rare disease research, some of it is self-evident. I think some you just touched on. Part of it is obviously studies need a certain number of patients in order to produce data to show whether a treatment works or not. And obviously, the rarer disease, the harder it is to find the number of patients you're going to need. Two, as you said, I think there's so much less awareness around rare disease that it's harder to get the patients involved, get them into the system where they'll learn about their options and learn about the potential treatments or potential studies that are out there for them. And then finally, another problem with rare disease is even though it's harder to study, you still need the same level of evidence. You want to know that the potential treatment you're going to use truly works. You want to know that, and of course the regulatory agencies want that. So you do need a fairly large body of data, again, with less patients available to help you produce that data.
Absolutely. And I think that's, especially when you talk about clinical trials, this is this real bottleneck that there's fewer patients and scattered expertise as well. And so in 2018, the SRF has launched the CONQUEST Registry, which is an acronym for Collaborative National Quality and Efficacy Registry, which is quite a mouthful. So we call it the CONQUEST Registry. And this aims to be a nationwide scleroderma patient registry and biosample repository, which is really exciting. So can you tell us a bit more about what it is and what it tries to achieve?
Absolutely. So the CONQUEST Registry is a registry program, and it includes really all of the major centers of excellence in scleroderma in the United States. It is United States only. The real goal here was to really understand the scleroderma in a sort of deeper, more robust way than we have to date. By starting fresh with a brand new registry program, we were able to really design it to make sure we're getting really strong, robust data on the patients who are taking part. And so what we've done is we've created a consortium of these major networks in the United States. And what we've been able to put into place was making sure that all of the centers are collecting consistent data and collecting it in the same manner so that we really have a very strong database. And we're doing some aspects of it almost look more like a clinical trial than what you would normally see in a registry. So things like we are having all of the CAT scans centrally read by one group of radiologists who will read and look at all of the CAT scans across all of the centers, again, to make sure we're really doing this in a consistent manner and getting really robust data.
It's so exciting. Not only do you try to standardize how the data are acquired, but also to reduce the bias in the analysis. That is really, really interesting. So I'm myself a biomedical image analyst by training, so I think I absolutely understand, this reduction in how data are read is so, so important. And then bringing together, all the data from different centers and having one central radiologist reading out the data is absolutely important. That's really interesting. And can you maybe also share with us how scientists, for example, can then access the data or the biosamples in the registry and repository?
Yep, absolutely. So we have a steering committee, a scientific steering committee that oversees the data as we collect it. And so outside researchers can apply to our group with a proposal, and our steering committee it basically adjudicates, looks at the proposal and makes a decision whether we think it's scientifically valid.
Which is always more than important, absolutely. But it's great to see that there is obviously a committee and different people looking at it and assessing the validity and the importance of the requests. That's really, really good. And something that obviously is also really important is patient involvement. And so I think patient involvement comes in so many different levels. And most of the time, we just think of patients as being involved in clinical trial as participants to, for example, be part of a study to take actually drugs or be part of a scan or maybe or give some bloods to be tested. But you really try to include them as co-designers, as advocates, and as leaders in your science and how you design it and how you talk with other scientists. And so you, or like the SRF, was developing CONQUEST, and that's a global perpetual platform for clinical trials. And that's obviously even more exciting because it's global. And so it involves really international experts and various different levels of people, research centers, funding, etc., which makes it much more complicated. Yeah, much, much more exciting, therefore, which is great. So can you maybe tell us what CONQUEST really means for the global research community and how it will advance the research in the future?
Absolutely, absolutely. And, we really, as you said, we are a patient organization. We're a US-based not-for-profit. Our approach to both Conquer and Conquest has been really based on our background, based on really patient-centric ideas and sort of where we as an organization come from. And that really was one of the hopes with Conquest. Our pharmaceutical partners do tremendous work in helping us find potential treatments and cures for diseases, including scleroderma. But we do feel as a patient organization, we come from a slightly different point of view and one that's really a little more focused on the patients than other types of researchers. What we're hoping to accomplish with CONQUEST, the key word there is platform. And what we're trying to put into place is basically a platform in order to test potential treatments for scleroderma. And so the difference is traditionally in a clinical trial, you set up a clinical trial in order to test one potential treatment. You test the treatment and then you tear it down. It's really about testing that one drug. It's a very long and expensive process. For an average scleroderma trial, you're talking about multiple years and a large sum of money. And so we've used the analogy, it's almost like you're building a football stadium to play one game and then you're tearing it down. That's the problem we're hoping to address. Hopefully we're creating a platform that we are working with. The goal is 165 centers around the globe to all be involved. And the platform itself should be agnostic to the particular therapy you're testing. But once it's up and running, we can test multiple therapies on that platform. So right now we're testing 2 simultaneously, but once those are done, we can stop those 2 and try new ones without tearing the whole thing down. The goal is, again, to go back to my analogy, we can play multiple games, basically as many games as we want, without actually having to tear the stadium down.
Such a great analogy. Absolutely love it. It's really great. And for patients, what does that mean? Does that mean, for example, they can sign up to one study and then they can sign up directly to the next one? Or what does it mean for patients?
So you can sign up, and if you like all clinical studies, there's a screening procedure and you have to qualify. But if you qualify for the study, you will go into the study. Right now, the first 2 medicines we're testing the study is for 1 year. And then at the end of that year, there's basically a washout period. And if you still qualify and you want to enter again, you would have the opportunity to enter on one of the new arms once those open up.
That is really great. And also, I know that you do lots of work with raising awareness. And so because I have you here, I thought I'd ask you a few questions. You recently had the Scleroderma Forum to raise awareness and bring in clinicians and talk about lots of different aspects of scleroderma and everything around it. So maybe you can summarize why patients should attend and why clinicians should attend.
Yeah, thank you. So we really, our patient forum, which we do once a year in June, and we've been doing it for many years, long before I was involved with the organization. Yeah, we would really encourage, people to attend. We really try and gear it towards what topics are we hearing from our patients. Again, we are a patient organization. So all through the year, we're talking to our patients and the people involved. And we try in June to really summarize what are the key topics that have been coming up over the past year. So, this year we did a lot on CAR T because there just seems to be a lot of interest and people are curious about it. So what I would actually encourage people to do is engage with us during the year. Let us know what is interesting, and we'll try and work that into our patient forum.
Oh, I love that, because my next note here was CAR T-cell therapy. So if you wouldn't mind, I would love if you can maybe share a few words. What is it and why people are so excited about it?
Yep. So CAR T is a therapy. It's basically an autoimmune therapy in which your own white cells are almost reprogrammed to help treat your disease. It's the most exciting piece about it is, one, there is good evidence it works so far in other autoimmune diseases, particularly in lupus. So the initial data that we're seeing from lupus is really very good and very encouraging. And so it's exciting because it may offer a level of treatment that we haven't seen previously. And so the hope is that we'll see very similar results in scleroderma. Obviously, the diseases share a lot. They're both autoimmune diseases. And so there's a lot of excitement around it. And we're just beginning to get the first data in scleroderma. So we'll see over the next probably 2 to 3 years just how effective it is.
Absolutely. And I think at the moment, like you said, everyone's talking about it. So I'm sure we will hear much, much more about it. Because obviously you're not only a clinician, but also an attorney. So you get insights of both worlds, which is amazing. And putting together both worlds is really exciting, because I think you really know how to navigate this global research challenges and what it means in terms of, regulations and all the, foundations, etc. Maybe you can share a little bit about, what is the most exciting thing working with SRF for your, bringing together your knowledge as a clinician and attorney?
Absolutely. And I think it is, you just touched on it. It's such a highly regulated field, doing clinical studies, as it should be. We are doing experiments and patients are taking part and patients are taking risks. And we always need to keep that in the front of our minds. And that is why it's highly regulated and needs to be highly regulated. At the same time, when you're talking about any rare disease like scleroderma or others, you want some flexibility in those regulations to just make it a little more practical to actually do the studies you need to do and get the data you need to prove a new treatment works. And so I think it's that combination, working at a place like SRF, where we're really trying to find treatments for a rare disease, that legal background, understanding that regulatory landscape, and maybe where there is flexibility and where you can talk to regulators about letting you do things a little differently, because that's what makes sense for these patients, I think is one of the exciting pieces.
That is so true, absolutely. And I think also, obviously, because you see both sides and you also work a lot with industry, the question is obviously like, what do you think like a patient-focused foundation like the SRF, it is so special because it is really patient-driven. What do you think, can you learn from the industry and vice versa? The industry really learns from working with patient-driven foundations.
Yep. I do think that it works both ways. I'll start with the second part of your question, which is I think industry partners really do gain a lot by working with patient organizations. And it's something I have seen change over my career. I think that most pharmaceutical companies and biotech companies are doing this much better than they used to. They are really beginning on their own to bring in the patient voice and the patient journey, sort of understand what a potential treatment could mean for a patient. Also, when you run a clinical study, what are you really asking of the patient? I think that often will get lost in, I need certain data and I want an answer in a certain length of time, but making sure that what all this means to the patient is really an important piece of that is something that industry gets from working with patient organizations. The other side works also, though. I think the patient organizations really gain a lot from their interactions with pharmaceutical partners. It's very difficult to create a new treatment. It's a very long, complex, expensive process. It is complex because of the regulatory landscape, and it takes a lot of real expertise to do that. And I think patient organizations often go in without a deep understanding of that and sort of understanding what it's going to take to get a new treatment for their patients is something they can often learn from industry.
Yeah, it is so, so important to see the different side of the things because obviously as a patient, you see, one side of the coin, and then as industry partner, you see one side of the coin, as clinician another, as attorney another. So it's great if you bring all those voices together. And I guess especially also maybe now with like online kind of meeting rooms, it's a little bit easier to also talk globally and see different kind of regional cultural impacts and insights, which is really nice to see that, everyone coming together and like you say, changed over the years, that people really try and listen to other voices more and more, which is great. And so I think also like another question maybe would be, and that's very hugely optimistic, is if funding and logistics was not really an objective, what initiative would you like to launch tomorrow?
I think the one thing, if truly funding was not an issue, for me, working at the Scleroderma Research Foundation, I think one of the things we found, there are a lot of good treatments for other autoimmune diseases. There are a lot of good immune modulatory treatments out there, many of which probably would treat or help treat scleroderma. And so one of the things I think I would like to do is really help get those potential treatments. Some of them are approved medicines, some are still in development, but find a way so that they can be tested in patients with scleroderma to see which of those help scleroderma patients, which don't, and really get good evidence of how should we be treating our patients with these medicines that just haven't really been tested appropriately in our population.
Yeah, and I think from a patient perspective, I'm always, I love being involved in all different research studies. I always say like, yes, sign me up, So I think, as a rare disease patient, you're always involved, or most of us are involved in various different studies anyways, right? So, bluntly said, one more medication doesn't really change a lot. So, but yeah, I think it would be great to transfer some of the medications and see if they have an effect. And, often it's also the little things that might make a huge difference in quality of life on the daily side. And yes, it would be great to see like a little bit more transfer of different medications. Absolutely. And so I think kind of coming a little bit to the future perspectives, and I know that there is definitely various challenges that we spoke about today, but I know that you're very clearly driven by optimism and the hope that there's more research and more funding and really a kind of drive towards a positive future. And so I think from our side, it would be really nice to hear like what kind of change would you like to see in like a search for better treatments for scleroderma?
I think, the future is very bright for the treatment of scleroderma. One, there are a lot of ongoing studies right now. There are a lot of experimental treatments out there that are being tested. I think we have seen, just in my time in industry, really an explosion of knowledge about the immune system, our understanding of the immune system over the last decade has become much, much deeper. It's allowed us to, as we understand the immune system, it's allowed us to really find more and more targeted and more effective treatments. And so for me, what I'd really like to see, I would like to see a treatment that is both more effective in really halting the progression of the disease and does so safely. And I do think that's a realistic goal over the next 10 years or so.
Absolutely. So kind of as a patient, again, kind of adding to that, I think you touched on really a lot of really important points. And I think what is the main thing is halting the disease progression. And for me, myself, I'm like on a very stable medication regime, but I know, especially in the first few years, it was utter chaos. And I think that is what a lot of people kind of don't really see. But I was constantly in hospital, trying new medications, trying what worked for me, what had a side effect, what impacted quality of life, and all of these good things. And I think that once you have a stable medication regime that works for you, that is personalized, that is a huge step. And as you mentioned, this patient-specific treatment with, like, for example, CAR T cells, that will be huge, right? Because it reduces side effects, it just improves quality of life, etc. And like you say, halting disease or even kind of reversing it to a certain degree would be absolutely amazing. And I think there's so much great research and work out there, which is really, really nice to see. And especially the patient-specific aspect of it, for me personally, is really exciting to just less side effects, more quality of life is really, really important. Absolutely. And so I think at the moment, we obviously talk a lot about CAR T cell therapy, but what do you think kind of for the next 10 years, like longer term outlook, what do you think is the next big step where scleroderma research is heading?
I think it's obviously, I do think the next big thing is CAR T, which hopefully could really be revolutionizing in how the disease is treated and understood. I think the next step after that is probably the genetics. We are slowly getting a deeper and deeper understanding of the underlying genetics of all autoimmune diseases, including scleroderma. And as you just said, personalized treatment. As we can understand the genetics, it opens the door to truly personalizing a treatment to what each individual needs. And I think that is probably the next longer term goal.
And there's so much more work to be done to understand, especially genetics, the immune system. There's so many cells, so many components to it. So yes, there's lots of work to do, absolutely. But it's great. And it's nice to end on this positive note that there's lots of exciting research happening and lots of new stuff to come, which is great. And so I kind of want to round up and thank you so, so much for joining us. It was amazing to talk to you. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you.
So today we are talking to Karen Skinner from LifeArc. And LifeArc is a UK-based medical research charity focused on translating early sciences into medical breakthroughs. Dr. Karen Skinner is the Chief Operating Officer, CEO at LifeArc, but she's also on the Board of Trustees at the Epilepsy Society, and she's a very esteemed keynote speaker and panelist. And she has over 30 years of experience in the life science industry, and she has held numerous leadership roles in big pharma. So she's really excited about accelerating the progress of scientific discoveries and create medical breakthroughs. And today she's going to talk with us about the work of LifeArc in the UK. So hello and welcome, Karen.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for inviting me to join the podcast. And also, I'm super delighted that you're hosting this podcast and focusing it on rare diseases and shining a spotlight on that area. So thank you very much to you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate you joining us. And so before we start, we always kind of like to get a really kind of broad overview. So maybe, Karen, you can touch on with us on how the UK rare disease research landscape is looking like and how it might compare to more the global landscape and what you're doing at LifeArc.
Well, yeah, happy to. So actually, the UK is a strong hub for rare disease research. We've got a really growing ecosystem, and there's been a lot of great developments in recent years. So the UK government has implemented several strategic tools. We've got the UK Rare Disease Framework, the England Rare Disease Action Plan. So they aim to improve diagnosis and access to treatments. There's also been further investment by the government and other charities such as LifeArc that have created specialist facilities in the UK, research delivery infrastructure, and really help build networks for collaborative research. And actually, the UK is also a global leader in genomic healthcare. So there's initiatives like the Generation Study from Genomics England that supports early diagnosis of rare genetic conditions. So actually, a lot of kind of great progress, I would say, but still a very long way to go. So although there's been good progress, it's actually been too slow in terms of, if we were rare diseases, in terms of how they're diagnosed. It's called a diagnostic odyssey, actually, because it takes so long for people to be diagnosed. And also progress has been too slow in terms of how their data is collected as well. There's big gaps in the understanding of the full economic impact of rare diseases in the UK, meaning that the actual estimates of cost and value are not always appropriate. And finally, I would say the UK's regulatory and health technology assessment system is pretty complicated to navigate for innovators when they're trying to seek approval for their products.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for that really broad overview. That's great to hear, especially also because I know that a few weeks ago, LifeArc actually has launched their new report with Genetic Alliance, touching on a few of the topics that you spoke about. But I know it is a lot about, the diagnostic journey, like you say, the diagnostic odyssey, because sometimes it takes many, many years, if not decades, for someone to get diagnosed. And that's really a struggle to get that diagnosis, but also that access to better treatment. And like you say, I think the UK is really a go-to place for rare disease research, which is absolutely amazing. But maybe you can share a few more insights from that report with our listeners and why they should really read this report and have an insight into what is going on in the UK.
Yeah, I have to. So this came about given we really wanted to better understand some of those barriers and develop some really actionable recommendations that could really help. And the frustrating thing is, like, a lot of the times we've got the science, but we just haven't got the system that we need to make the progress. So we convened this expert multidisciplinary task force. We had patients, scientists, regulators, industry leaders, policy makers, all working together to support us because we've all got a role to play. So we came out with kind of three main recommendations, three areas. So the first was around the diagnosis and data. And so here we were proposing that now we embed the data needs of rare diseases in the new proposed health data research service within the UK. And then also we're proposing that we incentivize and resource the standardization and harmonization of rare disease data as well, because that's a kind of big gap. The second area was around market access. So despite lots of innovations in the space, the requirements of the regulators, the regulatory bodies, the MHRA in the UK, and the health technology assessment body, so that's NICE in England, they're not always aligned, and that adds complexity and cost as well. So here we're proposing to generate robust evidence on the economic and social impact of rare diseases, so we really understand the true total cost, and also for those various regulatory bodies to align and clearly communicate what their evidence requirements for rare diseases are. And then the third area was the better support for innovators. So here we propose those bodies, the regulators, launch a concierge-style service to help the innovators navigate through the system and also map the pathway, so we really understand the cost of the various phases. So we named the report. It was called Accelerating R&D for Rare Diseases in the UK, and it was really about calling on all sectors to work together, to think differently, to bring to life those actions, and then hopefully we can really try and drive change together.
That's so great to hear, especially that so many different people were involved, because as you say, there's so many red tapes, but also complex systems in place that you really need to understand to kind of how to navigate from like the NICE to all the recommendation boards, etc. There's just so much knowledge. But I really love the report because, like you say, it's actionable. And I think that is really nice, because often these reports are just reporting, but not actually putting something into action. And so it's really nice to hear that. So do you have a timeline, for example, for some of these action points that you would be looking at? Are we looking at, for example, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? What's kind of realistic?
We want to make more progress than that. No. So, yeah, I mean, obviously it's going to take, it takes the whole ecosystem to work together. So as I say, a lot of these recommendations, for example, we talked about changes to the health data research service. Well, obviously that's only just getting off the ground now, so that was supported by the government and welcome. And so so I suppose we're relying on other people. It's not just us, but I would hope that we can make there's a lot of small steps that we can make now. I certainly hope that there will be a new UK rare disease framework developed and published. So the last one kind of runs out next year, so I really hope that will be refreshed, and that will be another catalyst for change as well. So I hope within a 3 to 5 year timeframe, we can make some significant developments in these areas. But obviously, with all therapeutic development, it takes quite a little bit longer for those developments to result in actual impact for patients.
That's so good to hear. Like, I love if you say, you want to do it now and you want to do lots of little steps, because obviously that is much more actionable than like one big project that might be, working in 20 years. So that's really great to hear. And you slightly touched also on like R&D problems. And I think a lot of that is probably also about designing and conducting rare disease trials, right? Because we know that they're really difficult to set up. But I also know LifeArc works with various different networks and kind of consortia around rare disease. Can you maybe talk about, the barriers around actually designing rare disease trials?
Yeah, I mean, clinical trials are difficult at the best of times, but in the rare disease space, you've got those extra hurdles. So first of all, just the small patient populations, that makes recruitment a lot more challenging. It reduces the statistical power, and so it's harder to demonstrate efficacy. There's a lack of data on progression and symptoms, lack of validated biomarkers. So that makes it harder to define the appropriate endpoints and trial durations. And also funding. Commercial viability is a big issue in the rare disease space, particularly in the ultra-rare disease space, where uncertain financial returns then limit the investment in clinical trials. So there's several things that LifeArc has been doing to tackle this. So one of these things, we made a 40 million investment into LifeArc translational centres for rare disease. Now, one of those centres, where we've made a 12 million investment just in that centre, is focused particularly around the acceleration of rare disease trials. So that centre aims to boost the capacity and efficiency of rare disease trials across the UK, able to facilitate equitable recruitment, streamlining admin, and really offering a kind of one-stop shop for trial design and support. So that's led by Professor David Jones in Newcastle, but it's not just the Newcastle Centre, there's a network. So we've got key collaborators in Birmingham and Belfast as well. So that centre in particular, I think, is going to be really game-changing, but there are other centres as well. So the other centres deal with the kind of the small dispersed patient population problem that we have by providing a focal point. So we've got centres that are focused on rare respiratory diseases, a centre focused on rare kidney diseases, and a centre focused on rare mitochondrial diseases. And then we've got a central hub we collaborate with Beacon and Genetic Alliance UK. And through that hub, we support those centres then with public engagement and policy development as well. So that's one big thing we're doing. But another thing that we're doing is also funding clinical trials ourselves. So we're partnering with researchers on rare disease, helping progress their innovations through clinical trials. So we're supporting early stage clinical trials with a view to delivering patient impact within the next 3 to 5 years. So we've got trials already underway in areas such as motor neuron disease. That's a rare neurodegenerative condition. Also epidermolysis bullosa. That's a rare skin condition. So we've already got quite a lot of exciting activity underway.
That's amazing. And it's so nice to also hear the breadth of different projects that are going on. So it's not just one thing, it's not just funding and then kind of leaving people to it, but actually really helping researchers to put it all into place and kind of, like you say, having this one-stop shop. Also, one thing that you touched on is actually patient voices. And I think that is, cannot be overstated how important it is to listen to patients. And you mentioned that you do listen to them. For example, in the R&D report, you really included patients into shaping that. But maybe you can touch on some other points where you include patients and patient voices into how LifeArc works and, for example, invests money.
Yeah, I mean, they are the ultimate beneficiaries of medical research and drug development. So they're critical stakeholders just like anybody else. And they're experts through their own lived experience of disease. So we engage patients routinely. And we've really used their feedback to better understand the unmet needs and to pressure test the kind of how we prioritize the opportunities, because it's based on the greatest impact for patients. So it's actually really helped us uncover some blind spots that we had and give us more confidence in our decision making. So, for example, we engage right at the start of our research. So when we're developing a new therapeutic or diagnostic, we develop something called a target product profile. So it's really what are we aiming to achieve here? So we make sure that whatever product we deliver is actually going to meet their highest unmet needs. You don't want to go through all that investment and find out, well, actually, you've invested time doing this and we'd have much rather you would work when focused on this particular aspect. So that's been incredibly helpful.
Yeah, I think especially also oftentimes when I speak to rare disease patients, it is also a lot about quality of life. And so like you say, for example, if you can have the best drug in the world, but if it actually decreases quality of life. I don't think any patient really wants that. So I think, aspects like that are really, really important. And like you say, pressure test from the start and see, what's really important to patients is so, so important.
Well, it really reminds you, actually, because often when you're working in a lab, you're so focused on the target and you're focused on the disease rather than the person. And actually, when you speak to the person, you think this is just a person trying to lead their normal life just like we are. It's just that they're living with a disease. And so I think when you take that holistic view of the patient, and it's very motivating, I think for our teams as well, actually, to be engaging with patients and seeing the real difference in the potential impact that we can have.
Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. Like you say, everything that you do at the end goes to the patients. And if it improves their life expectancy, or quality of life, what else can you ask for? That's really great. And I bet, like you say, very rewarding as well. So that's really great to hear. Also, obviously, we know that you are speaking at lots of different events and you are often panelists and keynote. And actually, I know that very recently you have been at the White House Cell and Gene Therapy Forum. So maybe you can tell us the cell and gene therapies, why they are so exciting in general, and obviously maybe some of the insights that you had from the forum.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was an honor to be invited to the White House. I have to say that was a kind of bit of a highlight of my career so far, being able to do. And that's because LifeArc has invested in innovation hubs for gene therapies around the UK. So we've really contributed to the infrastructure around the UK and also funded some studies with cell and gene therapies in the rare disease space ourselves as well. So that meant I got invited along with other leaders in the field of cell and gene therapies. And actually, the field is experiencing like great momentum. There's been several breakthroughs, CRISPR-based therapies, which offered a potential for a one-time cure. We're seeing developments there. The first engineered cell therapies approved for solid tumours, so that's exciting. Actually, there's a really large pipeline now. I think there's about over 4,000 therapies are in development in the cell and gene therapy space. So I think there's a lot to look forward to. There are now advances in automation, analytics, and more modular manufacturing. So taking a more platform approach to genome editing, that could be really transformational in the space. We had a lot of discussion at the workshop. So that's really expected to reduce cost and improve accessibility, which is a significant issue at the current time. Also, the regulatory agencies are really trying to make a difference. So they're continuing to adapt their frameworks to try and support accelerated approvals for the complex therapies. So far, we've seen a lot in the cancer space. We're going to see a lot more in the rare diseases spaces. But actually, I think what will happen in the rare disease space, we will then see that expanded to more common diseases as well. So I think we'll see it more in cardiovascular and neurological autoimmune diseases as well. So rare diseases can often be a route to expand out, to learn and develop new treatments for more common conditions as well and have a bigger impact.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really nice takeaway. It's not just a one-way street, but it can really help inform other research as well. And I think that's something that we often forget. It's not just one thing, but actually very wide research that can be applied. It's beautiful to hear that there's so many different research focuses and so much work going on. And obviously there's so many things that one could talk about for ages. But I think to kind of slowly start to wrap it up, I think I would love to hear, what is it that you are most excited about in the rare disease research landscape?
So, I mean, I think if we're going to continue to improve health outcomes for those with rare diseases, it's going to take all of us, We talked about the patient voice, advocates, researchers, clinicians, government, industry, everybody. And actually, everybody I talked to is saying this. So I'm really excited now to see what we can achieve by everybody working together. That's what our vision was for these centres. It was about actually getting people to collaborate. That's what our vision was for the task force report as well, for this publication. It was about getting everybody to come together to talk about these solutions. So I think if we do what we're going to say we're going to do, in that we all continue to collaborate and cooperate and build these networks and work together, I think, we could really take giant leaps forwards from where we've been in the past. I do.
Which is lovely because it takes me to the last question, which is that you spoke very briefly about the 3 to 5 year plan, but we love to also look further ahead, which is 10 to 20 years. And I know this is taking a leap, but maybe you can share what do you think is going to happen? Where would you like to see change in the next 10 to 20 years?
So if I was a rare disease patient, I would want to see in the future, if patients could receive a diagnosis within months instead of years, because at the moment it's 5 years. within months. If we could make sure that all rare disease patients have access to treatment. So when I say treatments, ideally curative or disease-modifying treatments, not treatments that just deal with their symptoms. And then if we could really improve their overall quality of life and life expectancy. So that, I think within that time frame, that is what we could expect to see for patients. And then the science and the processes that I'm talking about, they can help us get us there. So if we bring, as you talked about, data, if we have integrated data systems, if we enable real-time sharing of clinical and genomic and patient-reported data, that will really accelerate research and care. And I think we'll have, I would expect in the future, we'll have much more widespread use of targeted personalized medicine. And I think that's not just going to be in the rare disease space. I think that we will start to see that as more the norm now, rather than big blockbuster drugs of pharma in the past. I think we'll see a lot more personalized medicine as well.
Yeah, which would be so nice to see, not just like treatment of symptoms, but maybe even cure. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Keep It Science. It's been really so insightful and so nice to just hear all the breadth of work of LifeArc and also yourself that you're doing, because it's so important. So thank you so much for joining us today, Karen.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much.
This podcast was produced by Keep It Science, a collaboration between Acorn Scientific Marketing and Zeke's Art for Geeks, two award-winning science communication and marketing agencies based in the UK. If you enjoyed the episode and you're thinking about launching your own podcast, whether it's to share some expert insights, tell your company's story, or build market presence, we'd absolutely love to help you create a podcast with outstanding science and production quality.
So drop us a line at keepitscience@gmail.com, find us on LinkedIn, and if nothing else, keep it science.